Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 153. Today's interview is with author Jesper Schmidt.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram. Michael Miller could not be here today due to prior obligations on the Plane of Hate in EverQuest, which he doesn't play, but he has to go to the Plane of Hate anyway because he tricked me into saying the wrong episode number throughout this interview. But let's forget about that for a second and let's meet today's guest, Jesper Schmidt. Jesper is an author, YouTuber, cartographer, and of course, a world builder. He has a not-so-strange love of dragons that has awoken his focused ambition to create great fantasy. Jesper is a man that shows that a little imagination and passion coupled with a lot of time in a Finnish sauna leads to great fantasy fiction and world building. Here's today's guest. All right, very nice to meet you, Jesper. That is how you say that, correct?
Yeah, well, for me it's Jesper. But,
Jesper,
yeah, that's usually how the English speakers say it.
Jesper, that is correct. I did live in Germany for a while, so I probably should have remembered that one. All right. But you're actually from Denmark, correct?
I'm from Denmark, that's correct, yes.
Now, were you born and raised there, or did you move there, or how did you get into Denmark?
No, I was born and raised actually on the other side of the country, and then as I got older, I moved to Copenhagen, so I live a bit outside Copenhagen now.
Oh, very good. Well, I got to ask you up front before we get into it, do you feel orc or elf today?
Well, I guess it's Saturday, so I guess I should say elf because they're so kind of relaxed in their forest realms there. But I don't know. I would rather say dragon because I just love dragons too much.
Well, I don't think anyone can fault someone for loving dragons too much.
No, indeed.
All right. So why don't you take a moment and tell us a little bit about the latest work that you've been working on?
Yeah, sure thing. So I have a fantasy trilogy that I've been working on for, well, I think book one, probably 18 months now, which is set in a world that I called Eresdyn, which is a world I created myself. And this book is then called Desolation. And I guess the funny thing is that I've been working on the second book in the trilogy while the first one has been gone through the editing and what have you not. And actually, I'm almost about to complete the first draft of the second book, and that only took me 3 months in comparison to the 18 for the first one. So there's a lot of difference.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I just finished the third book in my first trilogy, and compared to the first draft especially, they seem to get a little faster for the first draft. So what Eresdyn is that how you pronounce the world?
Eresdyn.
Eresdyn. Okay. So tell us a little bit about Eresdyn for a second. What excites you about this world? What sort of inspired you to create the world for this trilogy? What were you looking for in the world?
Yeah, when I set out originally, this is my first fantasy trilogy, and I guess it wasn't really intentional here, but when I said dragon before, that was a coincidence in the sense that that was also my starting point when I thought about this world, because I just wanted my first trilogy to feature dragons. So that was where I started, with some kind of starting point saying, okay, I need something that is based off of dragons. I did, I think, go totally overboard with the world building before I started. So I had a ton of notes with all kinds of stuff. But I really settled on, let's say, a lighter version of what I started out by creating, so that I have, let's say, a dragon god that is kind of the only real dragon that's left in this world. He has then done some stuff that would be too spoilers to say over here, but he's kind of created a half dragon race kind of thing, where the main antagonist is then the last surviving part of this race.
Okay.
So he's kind of a very powerful dragon-like creature.
Excellent. No, personally, I'm a huge fan of dragons. I do use them in my world as well. So it sounds like the dragons in your world are epic scale. So, and these aren't, even more so than normal dragons, things you do not want to mess with.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there is only this one dragon left. He's called Gauntlet, and he's like the dragon god there. So, nobody would ever want to mess with him.
Very good. So, when you do world building, how do you connect it back to your story? How do you like to weave it into your story?
Well, I would say very carefully, in the sense that I do love the world building part, and as I just said, and I probably love it too much. But I think as writing fiction, you need to be really careful not to tie too much of it in. I think we as humans beings, once we've spent enough time developing something, then we tend to want to use it as well. And I think that's the dangerous part with the fiction, because not kind of, well, now I created, so I'm going to use it as well. But then it just becomes too much info dumping. I mean, you need to keep focusing on the story and tell the story, and then when the world building makes sense to weave in, to give the kind of immersion part that there is more beyond the forest than you hear about in the prose itself, then that's where I try to weave it in. As I said, I try to be really careful not to do too much.
So when you're revealing stuff that's common to characters, do you kind of leave that up a bit to the imagination of the reader, or do you like to try and have the character experience something that for the character should be normal, but is actually unique and something you want to pull out? How do you deal with that circumstance?
Yeah, well, I guess that's also why part of why it took 18 months to do the first book was that I had to trash the first 50. I wrote 50,000 words and trashed it all and started over because I think writing fantasy is difficult in the sense that you kind of have to, well, you have to learn how to do that whole weaving in a way that it doesn't become or doesn't pull the reader out of the story, which it very easily does. And because just as you said, the characters already know all this stuff, so why would they talk about it?
That's right.
They don't talk about stuff they already know. So sometimes I, for example, could do it in the sense that what is happening is something that the character then reflects upon. Well, that was like this time, or whatever, and then indirectly weaving it in without becoming too much of a info dumping. And then, of course, other parts of the story. My main character is not a young girl, but a young woman, I would say, called Aya. And of course, all this stuff about the dragons and stuff, for her, that's only myth and legends. So she doesn't believe that all of this, more or less nobody believes that they still exist. So when she starts getting in touch with these kind of supernatural forces, then there is no problem in kind of talking about it between the characters, because for them, it is not everyday life. So... But it's, I guess it's kind of an art form to do it right, and the more you write, the better you become.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. The more you world build and expose it to other people and have them point out your flaws, the easier it should get. So I guess there's a bit of staying strong with that.
Yeah.
Now you started young with your brother, but when did you know that you actually had a love for world building?
Actually, I have a shorter nonfiction book on fantasy map making now, and within the first beginning of that book, I actually talk a bit about this, because I think for me it ties back to the map making stuff, because I remember as a very young kid or child, I think I'd probably been like 10 or 12, and my brother is three years younger than me. And I don't remember why we started doing it, but I remember at some point we got this like huge piece of paper on my parents' dinner table, and then we started drawing mountains and cities and all kinds of stuff. And then we had, I can't remember if it was really characters or whatever it was, but we were moving things around these places and tried to kind of immerse ourselves in that world. And from that point onwards, there was always some kind of system around all our games, either not necessarily a map, but then some kind of character sheets almost, or leveling up systems or whatever. So even when we were just playing with our cars on the floor or something, then there was some kind of system around it. And I guess it's just stuck with me ever since then.
So now map making, that's one of the reasons we first started talking. I'm a total map geek. You know, I honestly came into it actually from National Geographic. What kind of real world sort of mapping things sort of do you work in to make better maps? Because maps where there's a certain science to them, obviously when you're dealing with fantasy worlds, you can cheat a little bit. You know, if you don't know exactly the rainfall and the windward or wetward side of mountains, it's stuff you kind of pick up. Are there sort of real world things in mapping that sort of inspire you to work to make great maps?
Yeah, quite a lot actually, I would say. I guess I'm as lazy as the next man, so I don't like to do things over twice, which was kind of the reason why I wrote the fantasy map making book in the first place, because it was actually kind of a step-by-step approach that I created for myself. So I spent a ton of time researching all the different elements that what you're also referring to there. You know, how does mountains form, so how does wind travel across the regions, and where does rain fall, and where does deserts then pop up, and what have you not. And then I put it all together in this book, and then actually I use the same book nowadays myself when I create new maps, so I just follow my own step-by-step process there. Because honestly, I like the fact that it's, even though it's a fantasy world, that it's actually real geography and how it works, because I believe that the average Joe, for example, probably doesn't know how all this stuff works, and maybe for that sense it doesn't matter, but I still do believe that if average Joe looks at a map in a book and there's something completely off, he might not be able to say why, but I do believe that he will have some kind of sense that something is wrong with this map. And that just breaks the immersion. So I don't think there's no reason to break that on purpose. So I try to keep the geography fairly close to reality, actually.
Now, I do want to take a moment here and thank Jesper. He actually is going to give away a couple free copies, 10 actually, of his fantasy map making book. If you are a map geek of any sort, there'll be a link on the show notes for episode 152, and in there will be the actual link to go get the free ebook. So and if you go to Twitter, and there'll be links to all of this stuff in the description as well too. Give Jesper a thank you for just being a cool guy and sharing some of this stuff, because the geography, I find, is one thing that does create fear in a lot of people, because they don't think, like Jesper just said, that they don't think about the consequences. They just kind of look at it and know there's something wrong. So, go check out this book, try it out and see if it can help make your map making better. All right. So now, along with map making, which I think is, I think that's a natural lure for, if you have a geek mind, to pull you right into world building. Were you involved with your brother, like role playing, or why start all of the fantasy map making and building?
Yeah, so as young kids, we did do some role playing, some of the D&D stuff, and creating worlds and maps. So I think I've more or less created worlds since I was a child. So
in the blood.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of just become a part of me. So when I wanted to start writing, it was was a given. I couldn't imagine writing anything else than fantasy. It's just I just love that genre too much, so that had to be it.
Oh, very good. Okay, so now you're taking. You've actually taken in certain ways, and you're getting even deeper into actually sharing your stuff out there. So what was that one moment that I can share my stuff out and not be afraid?
I think first of all, I would say that I have been working and I'm still working in corporate, and I've done so for decades now. So I'm very used to sharing stuff in that sense, and I was never really worried about that. But the thing that I was worried is probably too big a word for it. But the thing I was thinking about, at least when I started writing, was can I even write something that people would want to read, and can I make it good enough quality? So I think when I had that experience, it was really when I had submitted the first self-edited draft of Desolation to my editor, and then once I got that back, then that was kind of where I got my I can do this at the experience, because it was quite nerve-wracking waiting for the book to come back. I mean, you spent 18 months writing 100K words, and what if it came back and said, "What is this crap?"
Here's your money back. Get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it actually came back. I just wrote down because I couldn't. I just checked it yesterday what it was she actually said, because I couldn't remember exactly the wording. But it came back with 2 sentences, among all kinds of other things. But in her highlight, kind of, she said, "This is the most together and well thought out manuscript I've seen." And then she went on to say, "Plot and character development was great. You can imagine how." That made me, as a first-time author, feel that when I got those sentences back, I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I can do this."
Wow, that's 18 months well spent. Yeah. Well, I think too, it's good. It's like, I think one of the flaws self-publishing indie authors typically make is it's very easy to hit the publish button. And I think it's good that you're taking the time going through the editing process. I'm assuming you work with people to put together like the cover for the book as well too, but to try and put together a actual book that could be published by someone else instead of just one that could be published by pushing a button on Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as an author, or as authors in general, I believe that we are our own brand as a person, and I wouldn't want to put something out there that I didn't feel was, let's say, of good enough quality. So I pay very good cover designers to do a very professional cover, and I spent the money I need to spend on the editing, and I have a team of beta readers that gives me a lot of feedback, and try to tweak the stuff until it's, I would say, good enough, because there's also, I think, a point to be made about you can also continue tweaking forever. So we also have to stop at some time and say that this is good enough now, and then release it and move on to the next book. But I do believe quality is very important if you want to do any long-term earnings from writing.
Very good. So in life in general, whether it's author or anything, what is your biggest achievement to date?
I really feel that writing this Desolation is the biggest achievement, because honestly, I was so much out of my comfort zone. I've been doing PowerPoint presentations and all that stuff for more than a decade, and I'm very used to that stuff. So I'm very used to communicating. I'm very used to kind of building a storyline, if you can call that, around a PowerPoint, for example. But the language is very corporate. So actually trying to make fiction prose that kind of immerses the reader into it, that was a challenge, and it was difficult for me to get into that way of thinking. So I think I was really happy once Desolation. Well, it is kind of it is done now, but it just right at this point in a moment when we're recording this, it sits with my book formatter who's just putting some nice section break graphics in the ebook and making the headers on each chapter look very nice and stuff like that. So as soon as I get it back, then it's ready to publish.
Do you have a planned launch date for the novel?
Well, I had planned last week. But,
so yes.
Yeah. But right now I'm currently chasing my book format a bit to get a date from once I'm gonna get it back. But hopefully sooner before later. So if all goes well, I hope next week. But let's see.
Very good. Now, as a person who works in corporate, in a day job, do you feel there's benefits to your corporate world with working your imagination and world building? Do you see any positive feedbacks going back to the real world task, I guess, even though writing a book is real world, but into the other things that you do for business? Do you feel there's a benefit from world building and storytelling?
I think I never really, in general, I would say no, I have not really seen it. I did get one comment, I think perhaps 6 months ago or something, that somebody pointed out that they thought my emails was, the texting my emails was different in some way. So perhaps I've done it without really thinking about it a bit, that I write perhaps differently than before, but not something I've been consciously thinking about in that sense, no.
All right. So now, if there's one thing that you wish you knew when you started this process of becoming an author, what do you wish someone would have told you to do sooner? What do you wish you knew earlier?
I think I spent a lot of time trying to think about, or researching, I would rather say, how to self-publish and how to market your books and all of those kind of business side of things, because of course author business was a new topic for me. A lot of time doing that on the internet, so I really felt that I was fairly prepared in that sense. I had my email list set up from day one, more or less. I had Twitter presence. I have a YouTube channel that I'm running where I release fantasy videos every Monday. So I do all of that kind of stuff, and I had done that way ahead of my book even releasing. So I was kind of in control with that part, I would say. But I guess what I would have done was probably listening to more of the podcasts and trying to use the audio there. For some reason, and I don't know why, in my day job I work in telco, so I work with a lot of the technical side of things on a daily basis. But in my personal life, for some strange reason, I'm really slow and adopting new technology for some reason. I don't know why. But so podcast was something I only started listening to for I don't know, maybe a year ago or something. But I think there are a lot of good podcasts out there that tells you a lot about and writing and all these kind of things, that and the wonderful thing that you can go around doing your shopping while you listen to it, and that stuff which no other media really allows you to do.
Yeah, awesome. Now YouTube is sort of slightly more complicated to do than a podcast, because you have to worry about video as well too. What's your favorite part in sharing out the fantasy on YouTube?
I kind of do, well, I would say two types of video probably on my YouTube channel. So one part is more the fantasy related. So that could be, I have one video, for example, where I cover vampires, because that's another creature that I really like. So I try to cover where did the lore about the vampires really start, and where did it come from? So I explain some of the background, and then I try to come up with an original twist to a vampire of my own in that video. So I have videos like that, and of course I share other videos about my world of Eristuen, where I talk about the setting and the different elements in the setting. So that's kind of one type of videos I do, and then the other type of videos that I do is much more kind of how-to videos. where I go into how do you do something, where I have, for example, one of my top 5 lessons learned of writing a first draft, for example, and I have one coming out this Monday on how to find an editor, for example. So I also have these kind of things, and I think on one part I really love to share this kind of how-to stuff, because that's also this part of the corporate day-to-day business that I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy sharing with other people on how I do things, and then hopefully they can take what makes sense for them and make it their own. And then the fantasy parts are, of course, it's just cool. It's interesting, I like to research where did vampires actually come from, or dragons or what have you not, and then the people watching my YouTube channel like fantasy, so I hope it's interesting for them too. So far, it seems that it is.
All right, now, do you think that there's something that maybe could have made you start sooner? I mean, I don't want you to necessarily say how old you are. That's up to you if you want to, but is there something that could have happened that could have started you down this road of self-publishing sooner? And do you think that would have been good?
It probably would have been good, because I quite like the writing stuff here, and I like immersing myself in this fantasy setting. So it would probably have been good if I started earlier. I'm 39 now, so I guess I could have started a long time ago. But I don't know if there was something that could have started, because essentially it was this Finnish Sauna that kind of pushed me into it. So it was a mindset thing. There was just something happened, and it just put me into that mindset where I thought, why am I thinking that I should wait until I retire to start writing some books? Why couldn't I just get up that hour earlier every morning and then write 1,000 words, and then over time there's going to be a book,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think one can force a mindset changes that. It just happened for some reason.
Well, it's good to start at some point. I have to say, it's very impressive, because it seems like you really have the outreach portion of it very solid, where it's like you're putting yourself out there in many ways. I think a lot of authors struggle with that end of it, where they want to do the writing part, but they're afraid to go in and build up their Twitter following, to share out on YouTube, to put that email list. I mean, that's a huge one, and be able to build up an audience. And what do you think sort of got you, and is it just your corporate background, but what do you think got you to listen to those kind of advice? And I don't know if you got that from someone or if you just naturally came upon it, but, what got you started and got you to put the email list out there as soon as you began, and to start doing these other ways to outreach, to start interacting with the people who might want to buy your book?
Yes, as you said, I mean, part of it is, of course, linked to my corporate background. So I know how to launch products from a corporate point of view, and the email list part was something that I found out during all my research. So I sat down from day one, and when I trashed those 50,000 words that I had written of desolation in the first part and started over. When I started over there, I had to cut one of the characters out of the book, because his storyline just took up too many words, and I couldn't fit him in. So I decided to take his storyline and put it into a character sheet. So that's available still today from my website. So one can download it and kind of get a behind-the-scenes look of a character that was supposed to be in the book, but was carved out in the end. So that part I kind of researched my way to. I would say the other part about all the social media stuff, that was probably more linked to my corporate background. So I knew I of course need some kind of social media form to share my stuff on. And I also knew that since I'm also running a day job here, I also knew that I couldn't do everything. So I had to. So I already had my Twitter already. So I thought, okay, I'll stay on that, because I quite like that platform. Actually, I'm pretty active on Twitter. I got my Facebook stuff set up. I never used that before I started writing. But I think that Facebook as a marketing engine is too powerful to avoid it. So I just had to.
You can't ignore it, can you?
No, indeed, exactly. And then I kind of thought, okay, I can be present in 3 places. So I had Twitter and I had Facebook, and then I was trying to make up my mind what I wanted to do as the third. And I was considering podcasts as well at some point. But when I started to research a bit on YouTube, I guess got my suspicions confirmed that I am, as any other author, really introvert. So but authors in general putting themselves on a video, that's I guess intimidating for most authors. So I just saw on that platform there was like no competition almost at all. There's very few fantasy authors on the platform. So I thought, okay, I'll do that one then, because that at least should give me an edge.
Well, very good. I hope the edge pays off. All right. So now we're about to enter into the gauntlet round. This is the round where I like to torture writers and trying to get them to answer things as quickly as possible without wordsmithing. All right, here we go. What held you back from sharing your worlds earlier?
Time.
Yeah. What else can you say? Favorite types of fantasy worlds: alien, Earth-like, or Earth-based?
Earth-like. I like Middle Earth. Yeah. It's wonderful.
Well, being my favorite one out there too, it's hard to say no to that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, some of ours will start popping up on that list at some point. All right.
Indeed.
What is your favorite time period for a fantasy setting?
Middle Ages. I love the Middle Aging weaponry and all of that stuff too much.
Yeah. And it's the classic. I mean, it's really the thing that I think drew a lot of us in. So.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay. So what is the most important habit or skill in creating a world?
I think to enjoy it, really. If you don't enjoy it, then don't do it. If you want to set up creating fantasy and you don't like the world building, then probably better to find a different genre to write.
Fair enough. All right. What tool or tools could you not work without?
A Scrivener. Absolutely.
Good choice. Let's see. What is one resource you would offer to a world builder starting down your path?
Books, I would say. Try to read some books on how others approach world building, and then just adjust it and tweak it and make sure you make it your own. But when you first start out, I think it's great to try to study what others have already done rather than inventing the whole thing from scratch again.
Right. Now, if you ended up in the world you're creating for your new book, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Find a place to hide.
Little foreshadowing for anyone interested in doing it. All right. Well, I do want to thank you today, Jesper, for keeping on me. It's been a while since I've done an interview. Life's been busy, but I appreciate the follow-up. And I'm very glad to actually meet you in person. We do chat on Twitter a lot. I would definitely say anyone out there, follow Jesper on Twitter, definitely. He's a great person to shoot ideas around with or to chat with. And now, if you go to the show notes for this episode, you're going to see links to his YouTube, to his Twitter, to his website. But definitely go check out his website. It's very well done. It's a clean site with great navigation. It'll be a great way to help introduce yourself to Jesper. And while you're there, sign up for his newsletter to thank him for those giveaways that he gave us today for those free map making books. So I want to thank the audience very much for listening in. I'm kind of cold on doing the interviews. I'd like to thank you, especially Jesper.
All right. Thanks a lot. And thanks for having me, Jeffrey. I've been listening to this podcast for a long while, so it's quite kind of fun to be on the other side of the microphone.
Well, I know Michael wanted to be here today, but unfortunately, something at the last minute came up and he could not show up because he was very much interested in meeting you as well, too. But it's kind of technically my show, so I'm the guy who has to carry the ball. And I love doing it because I love meeting other people and hearing their ideas. And You sound like a very smart guy, and I wish the best for you. Keep in touch.
Indeed, absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builder's Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builder's Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.